Imagine growing up in a palace where your sister is worshipped as a living goddess, and your family reunions usually end with someone being exiled, stabbed, or gift-wrapped for Rome. Welcome to the Ptolemaic dynasty, where betrayal was basically a love language, and Cleopatra wasn't the only queen who knew how to play the game. Her sister, Arsinoe, was once hailed as the rival queen, but history did what it does best. Deleted her, edited her out, and replaced her with a prettier, more marketable version. Spoiler alert, Cleopatra didn't do the deleting alone. Alexandria wakes like a rumor. Haze over the harbor, gulls heckling the triremes, priests lighting incense while accountants tally debts with the anxiety of sinners. Marble gleams because someone stayed up polishing. History gleams because someone stayed up lying. We pass the Pharos lighthouse, blinking like an insomniac god, and slip into the royal quarter, where the walls are high enough to keep out accountability. Inside, courtyards paved with geometry, fountains whispering gossip, fig trees pretending they haven't overheard treason. If palaces had a smell, it would be myrrh, sweat, and expensive denial. Breathe that in luxury is just fear that moisturizes. Meet the Ptolemies, Macedonian imports who showed up with Alexander the Great and then refused to leave. Their brand is divinity. Their business model is dysfunction. They marry each other for convenience, like corporate mergers with more eyeliner. Think of them as the original reality TV family, if the Kardashians could declare war. You've heard of family drama. This one comes with a treasury. Their royal motto might as well be, keep it in the bloodline, keep it out of the courts. At the heart of this royal opera are two sisters, Cleopatra and Arsinoe. One was destined for marble statues and overpriced Netflix adaptations. The other was destined for footnotes. Cleopatra, yes, that Cleopatra, glides through the palace like confidence incarnate. Servants part, scholars blush, and even the cats act unionized in her favor. She speaks every language worth flattering and makes philosophy sound like seduction. Arsinoe, by contrast, is the quiet one, the observer, the pause between Cleopatra's sentences. If Cleopatra is sunlight, Arsinoe learns to see in the dark. She watches her sister, studies her like a puzzle, and learns the first rule of survival here: attention is ammunition. Their father, Ptolemy XII, nicknamed Auletes, the flute player, is less a king and more a vibe. He loves music, parties, and bribes, not necessarily in that order. Some nights he's Dionysus with a bar tab. Others, he's a storm in a toga. He pays Rome to keep him on the throne, then taxes Egypt to cover the check. Imagine a monarch treating governance like karaoke night, off-key but loud enough to drown out protest. When he laughs, the court laughs. When he frowns, bread gets expensive. Even the statues pretend to check their wallets. The palace itself is complicit. Mosaics tell stories of gods who loved their siblings a little too literally. The famed library hoards knowledge, the palace hoards secrets. Children grow up learning which corridors echo too loudly, which curtains hide conspiracies, which servants carry messages disguised as gossip. Arsinoe becomes fluent in silence. She learns to walk softly, to listen harder, to survive in the gaps between words. Because in this family, conversation is just foreplay for betrayal. Cleopatra, on the other hand, inhales ambition like perfume. She debates philosophers at breakfast, quotes Homer by lunch, and probably invents new methods of manipulation by dinner. She's the kind of teenager who looks at destiny and asks for a promotion. The court swoons. Even her mistakes are stylish. Meanwhile, Arsinoe cultivates patience, the kind that makes snakes look impulsive. She observes who Cleopatra flatters, who she ignores, and how charm can be weaponized. One sister commands attention, the other collects it for later. Which one sounds more dangerous to you? Festival day arrives. Cymbals crash, incense thickens, and the Nile glitters like it's been bribed. Cleopatra appears in a chariot plated with gold that has an ego, while priests chant her lineage like a brand slogan. The people roar, believing they're witnessing divinity. From a shaded balcony, Arsinoe watches. Envy flickers, then fades. She isn't dazzled. She's calculating. Every bow, every cheer, every trembling servant. All data. If power is theater, Arsinoe is already learning stage direction. But tenderness exists here too in small, endangered forms. Arsinoe sneaks honey cakes to nervous servants. Cleopatra gifts scrolls to poets too anxious to speak. Sometimes their eyes meet across the hall. A silent truce, a shared memory of being human before the crown decided otherwise. It lasts seconds. Then the masks return, the gold hardens, and the palace resumes its favorite sport, premeditated affection. Outside the palace walls, Alexandria thrums with contradictions. Priests argue tax exemptions while sailors tattoo prayers they barely believe. Grain caravans move through alleys like constellations on the ground. The lighthouse blinks its gospel of order, but everyone knows chaos is the local deity. Cleopatra studies the city like an anatomy student studies veins. She wants to own its pulse. Arsinoe studies her sister, quietly noting where the arteries are most vulnerable. Which education pays off longer, ruling the city or surviving it? Night brings the illusion of peace. Musicians play by lantern light, the fountains glitter like broken mirrors, and laughter drifts through courtyards already heavy with rumor. Ptolemy hosts another feast for Roman envoys, his charm flickering like a candle near the tax ledgers. Cleopatra keeps pace with the toasts, smiling through politics. Arsinoe drinks little, listens much. Every toast, every compliment, every side glance becomes part of her growing archive of grudges. She is 15 and already tired of being background royalty. If you looked closely, you might think Cleopatra was rehearsing for power. She was, but so was Arsinoe, only her play had no audience yet. The anatomy of a dynasty looks stable from the outside. Columns, crowns, ceremony. Inside, it's just scaffolding held together by gossip and desperation. Cleopatra dreams in languages. Arsinoe dreams in exit routes. One rehearses for glory, the other rehearses for escape. Before sleep, Cleopatra keeps a gold serpent bracelet beside her bed, foreshadowing, but she doesn't know that yet. Arsinoe lies awake, tracing invisible patterns on the ceiling, memorizing the rhythm of footsteps outside her door. She has learned that listening is armor, patience is power, and silence? Silence is the one language no one suspects you of mastering. We end tonight as the city exhales. The harbor murmurs. The torches dim. Cleopatra sleeps like someone confident history will adore her. Arsinoe doesn't sleep. She watches shadows move along the wall, and she counts them. Every one of them could be her future. Every one of them could be a threat. Somewhere in the dark, destiny rolls over and opens one eye. The match hasn't been struck yet, but the room already smells faintly of smoke. The palace mornings always start the same. Gold light slanting through lattice screens, the hum of servants pretending not to eavesdrop, and that faint whiff of politics disguised as perfume. But while Cleopatra rehearses how to greet ambassadors with just the right mix of intellect and flirtation, Arsinoe sits in the corner of a courtyard, half hidden behind a pillar, watching, always watching. If her sister was born to perform, Arsinoe was born to study the performance. Every gesture, every whisper, every subtle manipulation. Imagine growing up in a family where love was measured in loyalty, and loyalty expired faster than fresh figs. Cleopatra learns her languages. Arsinoe learns people. One memorizes grammar, the other memorizes glances. The older sister debates philosophers and astronomers while the younger studies how they breathe when they lie. It's not that Arsinoe doesn't crave knowledge. She just prefers knowledge that keeps her alive. Her tutors teach her mathematics and rhetoric, but her real education comes from watching her mother weep behind curtains. Courtiers kneel too deeply, and guards disappear after overhearing too much. Welcome to the Ptolemaic School of Diplomacy. Textbooks optional, paranoia mandatory. If Cleopatra is being trained to rule, Arsinoe is being trained to endure. She learns from the eunuchs who polish the palace floors, the ones who see everything and say nothing. They teach her that silence can protect more than secrets. It can protect lives. From the maids, she learns the subtle art of manipulation, how to compliment someone's robe while stealing their confidence. From the palace cats, she learns patience. Sit still, pretend to nap, then strike when it matters. Not bad lessons for a girl who knows she'll never be anyone's first choice. Sometimes she sneaks down to the servants' quarters, pretending she's lost. She isn't. She just likes the honesty of the air down there, the sound of people laughing without pretending it's political. The cooks joke about the royal tantrums, and the guards gossip about who's been bribing who. It's Egypt's unfiltered version of reality. Arsinoe listens, eyes wide, absorbing the chaos like scripture. Maybe power isn't in the throne room after all. Maybe it's in the kitchens, the alleys, the people who actually remember who they're feeding. Upstairs, Cleopatra is already Egypt's favorite daughter. Radiant, intelligent, magnetic. She can charm philosophers, manipulate priests, and make even marble statues seem to nod approvingly. She doesn't walk. She arrives. Arsinoe, meanwhile, becomes the expert in invisibility. The courtiers glance past her as if she's part of the furniture. But here's the secret. Invisibility is power disguised as insignificance. Nobody fears what they forget to notice. So Arsinoe becomes the palace ghost. Harmless, quiet, unnoticed, until she isn't. Let's pause for a moment. Picture a coronation rehearsal. Cleopatra, draped in linen and gold, practicing how to accept divine praise with just enough humility to make it believable. Priests chant, torches flicker. The air smells like roasted myrrh and ego. Arsinoe stands near the back, her expression unreadable. To everyone else, she's admiring her sister. But in her mind, she's dissecting the performance. The tilt of Cleopatra's head, the timing of her smiles, even the pauses between her words. Arsinoe sees the machinery beneath the myth, and something inside her shifts. Envy, yes, but mixed with admiration. Because if Cleopatra is building an empire out of illusion, Arsinoe is learning how illusions are made. At night, when the palace finally falls silent, Arsinoe wanders the library halls. What's left of them? The smell of parchment and oil lamps lingers like ghosts of forgotten wisdom. She runs her fingers along scrolls she can't read yet, dreaming of the day when she'll understand the power they hold. But her dreams aren't about ruling. They're about matching. She wants to be seen not by the world, but by herself. In a dynasty obsessed with divine bloodlines, that's the most human wish there is. Her father, Ptolemy XII, notices none of this. He's too busy writing love letters to Rome disguised as diplomatic treaties. Cleopatra becomes his confidant, his political prodigy. Arsinoe becomes the daughter he remembers to mention when he needs to look sentimental. Every dinner feels like a negotiation, every smile a transaction. The palace laughs at jokes that aren't funny because the man telling them signs the paychecks. Arsinoe learns that survival isn't about loyalty, it's about timing. Here's where it gets darkly funny. The royal family prays to gods who represent truth and justice, while actively burying both under gold. Cleopatra prays for wisdom. Arsinoe prays for a day without hearing her name compared to her sisters. The gods apparently have a twisted sense of humor. Sometimes Cleopatra, trying to play the kind sister, offers Arsinoe advice. "Don't worry," she says with a smile too polished to be comforting. "We'll rule together someday." Arsinoe nods, but inside she's already done the math. Together in this family means until one of us poisons the other. Still, she plays along because pretending to believe someone can be a stronger defense than confrontation. Cleopatra is learning how to win. Arsinoe is learning how to outlast. By her mid-teens, Arsinoe understands the palace better than most of its architects. She knows which corridors creak, which doors never fully close, and which advisors are bribed by Rome. She hears rumors about revolts in the south, about her father's debts, about Cleopatra's growing network of Roman friends. All these whispers swirl together like smoke. Beautiful, dangerous, impossible to grasp. But she knows something's coming. You can feel it in the air before a storm, that electric hum of destiny about to misbehave. And here's the twist. For all her sarcasm and silent calculation, Arsinoe still loves her sister. Or at least, she loves the memory of her. The child who once read stories to her under candlelight, the girl who defended her from bullies in the courtyard. But memories fade faster than power rises. Every smile Cleopatra gives her now feels rehearsed. Every touch feels like a press release. Arsinoe clings to the ghost of her sister, but even ghosts can't survive politics. The palace prepares for another festival. Gold leaf everywhere. Dancers rehearsing in the courtyards. Priests chanting about divine unity while privately placing bets on who'll fall from grace next. Cleopatra shines at the center of it all, radiant as ever. Arsinoe stands at the edge of the crowd, half in shadow, half in disbelief. The crowd chants Cleopatra's name like a hymn. Arsinoe whispers it too, but softly, almost as if testing its weight against her own. She wonders, just for a second, what if the world chanted my name instead? Let that sink in. That one thought, quiet, fragile, dangerous, will eventually burn cities. But for now, it just lingers in her chest like a secret she can't exhale. The drums echo through Alexandria, and the torches flicker as if nervous. The narrator voice dips low, almost tender. Every dynasty has its golden child, but the shadows? The shadows have sharper teeth. Arsinoe watches the throne from afar that night, eyes glinting like the Nile under moonlight. She doesn't know it yet, but she's already rewriting her fate. The girl who watched the throne is about to reach for it. And when she does, history and her sister won't see it coming. If Egypt had Yelp reviews for its pharaohs, Ptolemy XII would average about 2 stars. Great parties, terrible management. He's the kind of ruler who could bankrupt an empire and still act surprised when people get mad about it. His hobbies include excessive drinking, overtaxing the poor, and selling sacred statues to pay off Roman debts. You know, classic dad stuff. Imagine your father so desperate for approval that he literally bribes another nation to be his friend. That's Ptolemy in a nutshell, Egypt's human-shaped midlife crisis. Cleopatra, of course, is daddy's favorite. She inherits his flair for charm, his taste for danger, and unfortunately, his delusion that charisma can replace accountability. She follows him everywhere, into council meetings, diplomatic visits, and probably a few disasters waiting to happen. She learns to read Roman senators the way gamblers read dice. Arsinoe, meanwhile, learns to disappear, because when you live in a house where love is conditional, invisibility is a survival skill. Let's set the stage. It's late afternoon in Alexandria. The palace is glowing, the harbor smells like salt and rebellion, and Ptolemy XII is pacing like a man being chased by his own consequences. The people are rioting again, small problem, because apparently they don't appreciate paying Roman taxes while Rome gets all the benefits. The priests call it divine displeasure. The merchants call it bankruptcy. Ptolemy calls it Tuesday. He throws a feast to fix morale. It doesn't work. It never does. Arsinoe watches from a balcony as guards drag another protester away. She's young, but not naive. She understands that every scream down there is another crack in her family's marble facade. Her father's voice echoes through the halls. Smooth, musical, half-drunk. He tells Cleopatra that ruling Egypt means keeping Rome close, like hugging a crocodile and pretending you're not bleeding. Cleopatra nods, taking notes. Arsinoe, listening from the shadows, wonders if loyalty is just another word for slow self-destruction. Ptolemy XII fancies himself a cultured man. He writes poetry, plays the flute, and collects philosophers the way other people collect excuses. But under the silk and ceremony, he's terrified of losing power, of losing Rome's approval, of losing his image. His reign is a balancing act between desperation and denial. Every banquet feels like an apology tour. Every temple restoration doubles as a PR stunt. If Cleopatra's charm is a blade, Ptolemy's is a mask. Arsinoe sees through both. The rebellion intensifies. Alexandria, once a city of scholars, starts to look like an overcooked riot. Fires in the marketplace, soldiers switching sides mid-fight, statues toppled not out of ideology but exhaustion. Ptolemy flees naturally because courage isn't part of the family DNA. He takes Cleopatra with him and runs straight to Rome, leaving Arsinoe behind in a crumbling palace full of enemies. That's right, Daddy of the Year abandons his teenage daughter in a country that now hates her surname. Picture it. a royal procession sneaking out of the harbor at night. Cleopatra looks back at the city, guilt in her eyes, or maybe relief. Arsinoe stands at the docks, barefoot, watching the ships vanish into the fog. The air tastes like ash and betrayal. She doesn't cry. She just breathes deeply, like someone memorizing the smell of resentment. Because this is the origin story of her fury. For the first time, Arsinoe sees the throne not as a symbol, but as a lie, a golden chair balanced on debt and favoritism. Her father runs to Rome, the very empire squeezing Egypt dry. And he'll beg, he'll plead, he'll perform his flute solos at dinner parties if that's what it takes to get his kingdom back. Cleopatra will sit beside him, dazzling senators, learning the art of Roman flattery. Arsinoe, meanwhile, will learn hunger. Both are educations. Only one builds empathy. Weeks turn to months. The palace echoes differently now. Less laughter, more paranoia. Arsinoe starts attending council meetings uninvited, just to listen. The old advisors squirm when she speaks. She's too young to matter, but too clever to ignore. She asks questions no one wants to answer. If Rome owns our debts, do they own our gods too? Awkward silence. If we're descendants of Alexander, why do we need permission to rule our own land? More silence. You can almost hear the marble sweating. The narrator leans in, voice low, conspiratorial. You know your dad's priorities are bad when he treats an empire like a rental car. Drives it hard, breaks it, then hands it back to the Romans with a smile. The humor hits, but the undertone stings. Arsinoe isn't laughing. She's realizing that loyalty to family is costing her loyalty to herself. Meanwhile, in Rome, Ptolemy XII is groveling before Pompey and Caesar, trading gold for favor. Cleopatra dazzles the court, part diplomat, part theater. They call her exotic, brilliant, dangerous, like a riddle wrapped in eyeliner. Arsinoe's name doesn't come up once. That's the Ptolemaic hierarchy for you. Attention equals existence. Back in Egypt, she becomes a ghost haunting her own lineage. But ghosts learn patience. Arsinoe starts forging her own network. Priests, merchants, disgruntled soldiers. Nothing major yet, just a whispering web of loyalty stitched together by quiet promises. She learns the power of being underestimated. If Cleopatra is the empire's face, Arsinoe will be its echo. And echoes, if you listen long enough, can turn into thunder. Eventually, Rome sends Ptolemy back with a Roman army in tow. Great news, right? The people who rebelled against Roman interference now get to be saved by Romans. The irony is practically choking. Cleopatra steps off the ship glowing like destiny incarnate. Arsinoe greets her with a bow so perfect it's almost insulting. Behind the polite smiles, there's tension sharp enough to cut marble. Two sisters, same bloodline, different weather systems. That night, the palace holds a feast to celebrate the restoration of Ptolemy's rule. There's music, wine, fireworks, distraction packaged as unity. But under the laughter, something is shifting. Arsinoe feels it like a splinter under her skin. The Rome-backed army patrols the streets. Taxes rise again. The people mutter. Cleopatra whispers to their father about reforms. Arsinoe whispers to the guards about opportunity. Which whisper do you think lasts longer? In the flicker of torchlight, Ptolemy raises a goblet to toast his daughters, the jewels of Egypt. He slurs something about divine destiny. Cleopatra smiles because she knows the cameras are metaphorically rolling. Arsinoe smiles because she knows destinies can be rewritten. The music swells, the crowd cheers, and for a brief second, everything looks peaceful. But peace, in this family, is just the pause before another betrayal. And somewhere deep in the palace, the youngest daughter stares at her reflection in a bronze mirror. Her father's voice echoes down the hall, praising Cleopatra again. Arsinoe whispers to her reflection, almost a vow, never again. The camera fades to black on that face. Calm, unreadable, dangerous. The narrator exhales softly. Some girls inherit crowns, others inherit chaos. Arsinoe got both. When Cleopatra and Ptolemy XII sail back into Alexandria, it's not a homecoming. It's a rebranding campaign with better lighting. The city that once spat their names now pretends to cheer, because Roman soldiers line the streets like critics waiting to give 5-star reviews or burn the theater down. Gold banners ripple, trumpets blare, and the Nile itself seems forced to clap. Cleopatra stands at the bow of the royal barge, wrapped in linen white as propaganda. Beside her, Ptolemy smiles, that polished, political grin of a man who thinks debt forgiveness counts as divine favor. And somewhere on the dock, Arsinoe watches, quiet, calculating, invisible again but not naive. She sees the way the crowd cheers only because Roman spears tell them to. She sees her sister soaking up that worship like sunlight, already rehearsing her legend. Cleopatra isn't just back. She's ascending. And Arsinoe? She's learning exactly what kind of shadow a goddess casts. Cleopatra wastes no time. She slides into power like silk on marble, effortlessly, dangerously. Her father's restored rule quickly becomes her warm-up act. She attends council meetings in golden robes that whisper authority. She debates priests until they question their own faith. She even starts hosting Roman envoys for philosophical discussions, which everyone knows is dynastic code for flirting with benefits. Arsinoe watches from behind pillars, half disgusted, half impressed. Cleopatra's not just ruling, she's performing power itself. Let's be honest. Cleopatra doesn't need permission to command a room. She is the room. She walks in and oxygen applies for a visa. Her laugh can dissolve tension faster than a peace treaty. Even the marble statues seem to straighten their spines when she passes. Arsinoe studies this with forensic precision. She notes the way her sister turns every compliment into currency, every insult into theater. Cleopatra weaponizes charm. Arsinoe weaponizes observation. Two strategies, same battlefield. At dinner, Ptolemy XII toasts to his radiant daughters. Cleopatra smiles like a politician accepting applause she wrote herself. Arsinoe clinks her cup, quietly thinking, one of us is the sunrise, the other is the eclipse. Cleopatra's charm is relentless. She flatters the generals, jokes with the priests, and praises the servants by name, a gesture so radical it borders on witchcraft. The court eats it up. Everyone wants to be near the flame. Arsinoe just wonders how long before they all burn. And burn they will, when their father finally dies, likely exhausted from juggling debts and delusions. Cleopatra wastes zero time claiming the throne. She co-rules in theory with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who's technically old enough to own sandals but too young to challenge her intellect. In practice, she rules alone. The girl who once learned diplomacy by candlelight now commands an empire with a glance. For Arsinoe, it's déjà vu, another coronation she isn't invited to star in. The city explodes with celebration. Priests chant, trumpets scream, and banners drape the palace like the universe itself is congratulating Cleopatra. Arsinoe stands behind the columns again, that same spot she watched from years ago, except now she's older and harder. Her sister, glowing with divine approval, raises her hand to bless the crowd. Arsinoe feels something twist inside her. Admiration? Envy? Maybe both. Maybe something darker. She thinks of all the years she spent mastering silence while Cleopatra mastered attention. All the times she listened while her sister spoke for her. She wonders if she'll ever be more than an extra in someone else's myth. Then again, history has a way of mistaking patience for weakness, and Arsinoe is nothing if not patient. Let's pause for a reflective breath here, because every sibling rivalry starts small. A side glance, a shared tutor, a single word of praise distributed unequally. But in palaces, small things grow teeth. And jealousy in royal bloodlines? That's not an emotion, it's an inheritance. So yeah, breathe that in, the scent of myrrh, gold dust, and ambition starting to rot. Cleopatra's rule begins with flair, tax reforms, temple restorations, and carefully staged miracles. She feeds the people's hunger for spectacle like a modern influencer feeding the algorithm. She bathes in milk, recites poetry in the marketplace, and gives interviews to philosophers about how Egypt's destiny flows through her veins. And to be fair, it works. People adore her. Rome notices her. The priests reluctantly crown her daughter of Isis. Cleopatra isn't just ruling Egypt. She's rebranding it. Meanwhile, Arsinoe becomes her sister's aesthetic contrast. Cleopatra is marble. Arsinoe is sandstone. Cleopatra's perfume smells like imported roses. Arsinoe's like frankincense and defiance. She starts cultivating her own image, the pure Egyptian princess, uncorrupted by Greek vanity or Roman alliances. A clever move, though she probably doesn't see yet how dangerous that positioning will become. When your sister's marketing herself as divine, you'd better be careful what god you challenge. The narrator leans in, voice dripping with irony. Every family has that one overachieving sibling. Cleopatra just happened to be the one who weaponized eyeliner. Arsinoe keeps her distance publicly, but privately she starts gathering discontent like firewood. She visits the temples more often, earning whispers of devotion from priests nostalgic for true Egyptian rule. She listens to merchants complain about Roman taxes, nodding with practiced sympathy. And slowly, quietly, people start to remember her name. Not out of loyalty yet, but out of curiosity. The forgotten princess starts becoming an idea. Meanwhile, Cleopatra's reign starts to strain under its own brilliance. The Nile fails to flood properly one year, grain prices soar, and suddenly the people remember that even goddesses can't fill empty stomachs. The priests murmur that the gods are displeased. Cleopatra blames the Romans. The Romans blame her spending habits. The tension thickens like honey over fire. In the quiet of her chambers, Arsinoe watches her sister pacing the throne room, commanding advisors with the confidence of someone who's never had to apologize. She sees the cracks forming, invisible to the crowd, glaring to her. The courtiers who once bowed too deeply now hesitate. The soldiers who cheered too loudly now whisper. Cleopatra may be divine, but divinity has a short shelf life in bad harvest years. And that's when Arsinoe feels it, the pulse of possibility. 4 years, she's lived in the long shadow of her sister's legend. But shadows, given the right light, can become shapes of their own. She starts keeping notes on troop movements, foreign correspondence, anything that might matter later. She's not plotting yet. She's preparing. And preparation, in a royal family, is plotting with better manners. The chapter closes with the two sisters standing together at a balcony, watching the sun set over Alexandria. Cleopatra's voice is soft, almost sincere. "One day," she says, "you'll understand what it takes to rule." Arsinoe smiles faintly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Maybe," she replies, "but I already understand what it costs." The narrator lingers on the moment, two silhouettes against the dying light. Power divides families, but it also defines them. One sister learned to command the world's gaze. The other learned to survive when it looked away. The camera pulls back. The palace glows gold against the dusk. The harbor hums below, and somewhere, destiny writes a reminder in fine print. Never underestimate the quiet one. Rome had many obsessions. War, wine, and convincing itself it was civilized. But one day, Egypt floated into its orbit like a glittering fever dream. Exotic, rich, unstable. Basically the ancient equivalent of a celebrity meltdown Rome couldn't stop watching. And in the middle of that chaos stands Cleopatra, now queen of a kingdom she's barely holding on to. But fate, as always, loves a dramatic entrance. Cue Julius Caesar, the man who walked into every room like he owned it, because frankly, he almost did. When Caesar arrives in Alexandria, Egypt is already mid-meltdown. Cleopatra's younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, has staged a coup, with help from the kind of advisors who think treachery counts as patriotism. The city smells of rebellion and wet papyrus. Cleopatra is on the run, exiled, plotting her next move. Arsinoe, watching from the palace balcony, knows the family is now officially one argument away from mass extinction. But where her sister sees opportunity, Arsinoe sees exposure. And in a dynasty built on survival, exposure is fatal. Then, like a rumor wearing armor, Julius Caesar lands in Alexandria. 60 years old, already a living legend, with wrinkles carved by victory and ego. Rome follows him like an obsessed fan base. He's here on official business, which, in Roman terms, means cleaning up someone else's royal mess while also probably sleeping with someone. Cleopatra, being both royal and photogenic, fits the second part of that mission perfectly. Now, the story goes that she famously smuggled herself into his quarters rolled up in a carpet. Romantic, right? Except imagine being the servant tasked with carrying your queen through a war-torn city in a rug like contraband laundry. But when that carpet unfurls before Caesar, it's not just a queen who steps out. It's a political bombshell wrapped in linen. Caesar, used to manipulating men, finds himself intrigued by a woman who can manipulate myth. Arsinoe hears the rumors almost instantly. Her sister has returned, and she's bringing a Roman. The palace goes into meltdown mode. Some advisors cheer, others panic. The priests are offended, the soldiers confused. Cleopatra, meanwhile, smiles that terrifying, perfect smile that says, "I planned this." She waltzes into the palace with Caesar at her side, looking like she just reinvented diplomacy. Arsinoe doesn't need divine prophecy to know. The balance of power just shifted, and she's no longer the most dangerous woman in Egypt. Let's pause and appreciate the absurdity here. Egypt, a 3,000-year-old civilization, now depends on the romantic chemistry between one queen and one middle-aged Roman general. It's like watching your country's independence hinge on a Tinder date. But Caesar isn't just any man. He's Rome's thunderstorm in human form. Cleopatra plays the part perfectly. The devoted ally, the witty conversationalist, the living goddess who can make even conquest look consensual. Arsinoe keeps her distance, at least at first. She watches the two of them. Caesar all strategy and stoicism, Cleopatra all poetry and peril, and realizes that charm, not blood, is now the real weapon of survival. And worse, she can't compete on that battlefield. Cleopatra's presence consumes everything around her. Arsinoe's strength has always been in what she hides. But envy has a way of evolving. What begins as jealousy soon hardens into resolve. Arsinoe starts spending her nights in the temple libraries, studying old military records, histories of rebellions, prophecies of destiny. Knowledge, she decides, is her weapon. Cleopatra might seduce empires, but Arsinoe? She'll learn to command them. Meanwhile, the city begins to boil. The people are suspicious of Rome's presence, and even more suspicious of their queen's new guest. The markets buzz with gossip. She's sold Egypt to the Romans. No, she's playing them. No, she's in love. The truth? Probably all three. And beneath that noise, Arsinoe feels something ancient stir. The same rage that once built pyramids and toppled dynasties. If Cleopatra is aligning Egypt with Rome, then someone must defend Egypt from Rome. That someone, she decides, will be her. The camera pans to a dimly lit temple, flickering torchlight, priests whispering prayers to Isis. Arsinoe kneels before the statue, her head bowed. "Show me how to save my people," she murmurs. But what she's really asking for is power. The kind her sister now flaunts openly. The kind men like Caesar respect. The kind that changes names in history books. And history naturally listens, but with a sense of irony. Because outside, Alexandria is unraveling. Caesar's troops clash with Egyptian loyalists. The harbor burns, the palace walls echo with screams, and the smell of smoke seeps through even the marble corridors. Cleopatra and Caesar lock themselves in the royal compound, trapped but defiant. Arsinoe, on the other hand, finds herself swept up by the rebellion, not as a victim, but as a symbol. A priest kneels before her, trembling, calling her the true daughter of Egypt. The crowd takes it up like wildfire. "Pharaoh Arsinoe," they shout. The name catches, impossible to extinguish. She's barely 20, but suddenly the mob believes she's their salvation. And just like that, the forgotten sister becomes a queen, not through inheritance, but through chaos. The narrator chuckles dryly. Sometimes, jealousy isn't about wanting what someone has. It's about proving you could have had it too. As fires paint the night red, Arsinoe stands on the temple steps, the air thick with incense and rebellion. "We will drive them out," she cries. The crowd roars. For the first time, she feels what her sister must feel every day. The weight of eyes, the intoxication of belief. But belief is a fickle god, and revolution, like love, always asks for more than it gives. From the palace tower, Cleopatra watches her sister's uprising unfold below, torches moving like stars in revolt. She doesn't flinch. She just whispers to Caesar, "You see, even my family tries to overthrow me." He smirks. Family keeps the bloodline interesting. And in that moment, the stage is set. Two sisters, two queens, one city divided between them. The irony is delicious. The woman who learned silence now commands armies, and the woman who mastered speech must now defend her crown with steel. The narrator lowers their voice, almost intimate. History loves symmetry, especially when it bleeds. As dawn breaks, smoke curls above Alexandria like a crown of ghosts. Cleopatra sharpens her strategy. Arsinoe sharpens her resolve. And in the middle, Caesar sharpens his knives. The next chapter? The one where Egypt decides which queen it loves more, and which one it's willing to bury. The air in Alexandria tastes like metal. Smoke, salt, and the kind of tension you can only get when a city forgets who it belongs to. The streets once perfumed with jasmine now reek of fire and sweat. And in the middle of that chaos, the youngest daughter of a cursed dynasty climbs the temple steps to declare herself pharaoh. Not the puppet, not the spare, not the sister-in-waiting. Pharaoh Arsinoe IV, queen of the people. Let's rewind for context. Caesar and Cleopatra are holed up in the palace, trapped by rebellion, surrounded by angry Alexandrians who've decided that Roman guests and divine queens are both overrated. Ptolemy Xii's army, guided by his scheming regent Achilles, has the city in its grip. But leadership in Egypt, much like marriage in this family, is rarely a solo act. Enter Arsinoe, the teenager no one saw coming, the footnote suddenly holding the pen. She's escorted through the screaming streets by priests, their torches shaking in the wind. The crowd parts as she walks. Maybe it's fear, maybe awe, maybe the collective realization that this quiet girl has more steel in her spine than half the generals combined. The narrator leans in. Every revolution needs a face. Egypt just found one, and it's wearing eyeliner and divine entitlement. Inside the temple of Isis, Arsinoe stands before the statue of the goddess herself. Candles flicker. The air hums. The priests crown her with a simple golden diadem. No trumpets. No royal orchestra. Just the murmuring of the people outside, chanting her name like thunder in slow motion. Arsinoe. Arsine. She feels it vibrate in her bones, the dangerous warmth of belonging. Cleopatra's approval never gave her this. Rome's shadow never allowed it. For the first time, she's not living in anyone's story but her own. Then, a voice breaks the moment. General Ganymedes, her new military advisor, tall, scarred, and deeply allergic to losing. He kneels before her and says, "Egypt has been betrayed, my queen. Will you lead us?" It's both a question and a test. Arsinoe straightens her back, glances at the statue towering above her, and replies, "I was born in a palace of lies. Let's build something real." And just like that, the rebellion gains a cause, not just a crowd. Meanwhile, across the city, Caesar and Cleopatra hear the news. Arsinoe, the quiet one, the unimportant one, just declared herself pharaoh. Caesar laughs, but not kindly. "A child playing queen," he scoffs. Cleopatra doesn't laugh at all. She knows her sister. She knows how dangerous patience can become once it finds purpose. The narrator murmurs, "Underestimate a Ptolemy, and you might as well gift-wrap your own downfall." Arsinoe wastes no time. Under Ganymedes' command, her army tightens the noose around the palace. Roman ships burn in the harbor. Smoke rolls over the marble roofs like the breath of a dying god. Inside, Cleopatra paces beside Caesar, who's already drawing up countermeasures, reinforcements, strategy, spin. because even in war, reputation matters. Arsinoe might be winning battles, but Cleopatra still owns the narrative. For now, outside, the people crown Arsinoe with chants and devotion. They call her Daughter of Egypt, the voice of the old gods. The irony? She's as Macedonian as Cleopatra, another foreign queen pretending to be divine. But the crowd doesn't care about bloodlines anymore. They care about survival. And Arsinoe gives them something Cleopatra hasn't in years: hope that doesn't have a Roman accent. Let's take a slow breath here, because the funny thing about rebellion is that it feels righteous until you have to feed it. Food runs low. The Nile turns red with blood and silt. The libraries are raided for kindling. Priests hide relics under temple floors. Arsinoe's face is painted on walls, her name whispered in taverns, prayed in alleyways. She's everywhere. And yet, each victory costs her more pieces of herself. The narrator softens. Power doesn't corrupt. It just peels off your humanity layer by layer until you forget what mercy used to sound like. One night, a captured Roman is dragged before her. Ganymedes asks what should be done. The man trembles, claiming he's just a messenger. Arsinoe looks into his eyes, young, scared, probably someone's brother. She hesitates. Then, remembering the burnt homes, the corpses in the streets, her hesitation dies first. "Send him back," she says. "Alive." Ganymedes blinks in confusion. "Alive, my queen?" Arsinoe nods. "Let him tell Caesar that Egypt doesn't fear him. We pity him." The soldiers cheer. The messenger runs. And somewhere in the palace, Caesar clenches his jaw. Days blur into weeks. The siege grinds on. Arsinoe commands strategy meetings like a seasoned ruler. Maps scatter across temple floors. Couriers come and go with updates written in blood and sand. The young queen who once hid in corridors now commands legions. But exhaustion creeps in, the kind that comes from being worshipped and hunted at the same time. She gazes out over the burning city, wondering if this is what victory smells like. Meanwhile, Caesar's reinforcements finally arrive by sea. A fleet of disciplined soldiers who don't know the difference between defending and conquering. The tides turn. Skirmishes break out in the narrow streets, blades flashing like silver lightning. The narrator sighs. And just like that, the revolution's hashtag lost momentum. As dawn breaks one fateful morning, Arsinoe's forces suffer a devastating blow. Ganymedes' troops are ambushed. The Egyptians retreat toward the temple. The people who once chanted her name now look to her for miracles. She has none left to give. She's 19, barefoot on temple stone, her crown slipping sideways as the city collapses around her. Caesar's legions close in. Still, she refuses to surrender quietly. Standing before the temple doors, she calls out to her army, "If I must fall, I will fall as Pharaoh. Remember that." The crowd erupts, a desperate, broken roar that shakes the night. It's not victory, but it's something rarer. Defiance that survives even when hope doesn't. From the palace balcony, Cleopatra watches the temple glow under siege fire. Her expression is unreadable, part relief, part mourning, part calculation. Caesar, ever the pragmatist, mutters, "Your sister fought well." Cleopatra's reply is soft, almost loving. She learned from the best. The temple walls crumble. The uprising collapses. Arsinoe is captured, dragged through smoke and dust, her crown torn from her head. But she doesn't weep. She looks Caesar in the eye, her face streaked with soot and defiance, and whispers, "You can chain me, but Egypt remembers who I am." Caesar says nothing. He doesn't have to. History, as always, will do the silencing for him. The narrator lets a beat of silence stretch, the kind that hums with irony. Every revolution has a moment when it could have changed everything. This was hers. The camera pans upward, the city smoldering, the harbor glinting with wreckage, and Arsinoe, bound but unbroken, marching toward her next chapter. The rebellion is over. But the legend of the girl who dared to rival Cleopatra? That's just getting started. The siege of Alexandria wasn't just a war. It was theater. Smoke for curtains, blood for spotlight, and an audience forced to clap or die trying. Picture it. Flaming ships drifting across the harbor like funeral lanterns, soldiers shouting in a dozen languages, and Caesar pacing the palace corridors as if strategy alone could hold back the ocean. Outside, the city screams. Inside, history takes notes. Arsinoe's rebellion has fallen into chaos, but chaos is her natural element. She's 19, captured but unbroken, and the world is about to discover that she's more dangerous in chains than most kings are on thrones. Her general, Ganymedes, is dead or missing. Rumors vary depending on who's doing the boasting. The priests who crowned her have been scattered, their temples burning. Yet somehow, in the eyes of the people, Arsinoe is still a symbol, proof that defiance can bleed and still look divine. Caesar, on the other hand, has had enough of Egyptian melodrama. The man has conquered Gaul, rewritten Rome's constitution, and fathered more scandals than children. He didn't come here to referee sibling rivalry. He came to collect debts. But now, trapped between Cleopatra's palace and Arsinoe's remnants of an army, even he starts to realize something dangerous. This isn't just another conquest. This is personal. The camera pans across the harbor. Flames lick the water, reflecting off shattered bronze statues. The Library of Alexandria, that glittering brain of the ancient world, catches fire, its scrolls curling into black smoke that drifts toward the heavens. Knowledge itself burns quietly, while soldiers cheer loudly. The narrator exhales. If irony had a favorite city, it would be Alexandria. Inside the palace, Cleopatra plays her role to perfection. Draped in gold and strategy, she moves beside Caesar like a mirror designed to flatter him. Every word she speaks is both affection and persuasion. "You fight for order," she tells him. "So do I." He smirks, amused but not fooled. And yet, something about her calm, her confidence, makes him hesitate. Outside, his men fight for survival. Inside, he's already surrendered to charm. Meanwhile, in the chaos beyond the palace walls, Arsinoe's captors march her through the burning streets. Her wrists are bound, but her eyes are fire. The people whisper as she passes, not insults, but prayers. Even now, defeated, she looks like victory waiting for a rewrite. A soldier shoves her forward, muttering, "Traitor." Arsinoe turns her head just enough to answer, voice steady. "Only to those unworthy of loyalty." The soldier doesn't reply. You can't win arguments against people who've already turned into legend. At the harbor, Caesar orders the docks secured. Egyptian ships are sinking, one after another, smoke blooming like dark flowers across the sea. The Romans cheer as each mast falls. But amid that triumph, a quiet realization spreads. Alexandria isn't conquered, it's collapsing. Victory here feels less like conquest and more like survival. Let's pause. Take this in. A library burning, a queen rising, another in chains, and the greatest general in the world realizing he's now trapped in a soap opera with global consequences. Breathe that in: smoke, salt, and irony. The battle stretches for weeks. Every alley becomes a war zone, every temple a fortress. Arsinoe's followers fight like ghosts, refusing to die politely. Caesar's men, used to orderly combat, find themselves bogged down in chaos, their discipline unraveling under Egyptian ingenuity. Ganymedes may be gone, but his traps remain. Boiling oil, collapsing bridges, hidden archers. Alexandria itself fights back. The city has chosen its queen, even if the gods haven't. Then, one night, under a sky bruised with smoke, Arsinoe is brought before Caesar. The great Roman studies her like a puzzle carved from defiance. She's filthy, bruised, and still somehow regal. "You led armies against Rome," he says. "You defied your sister." Arsinoe meets his gaze, unflinching. "I defied foreign thieves who mistake conquest for civilization." The tent falls silent. Caesar smiles thinly, a politician's smile that hides calculation. He sees something in her, something he can't control, and that unsettles him more than any army. Cleopatra enters mid-interrogation, her footsteps soft but deliberate. She doesn't look at Arsinoe. She looks through her. She's young, Cleopatra says lightly. And misguided. Let her live, exile her to Ephesus. The temple there will keep her safe. Sounds merciful. It isn't. Caesar nods. The order is signed. Arsinoe is led away, her fate sealed in ink and irony. The narrator's tone shifts, quieter. Mercy, when offered by power, often smells like storage. The next morning, the siege breaks. Caesar's reinforcements storm the city, pushing Arsinoe's last defenders into the sea. Ptolemy XIII, Cleopatra's brother, drowns trying to flee. His body dragged down by golden armor that looked better in theory. The war ends not with peace, but with exhaustion. Alexandria is scarred, Cleopatra restored, and the Nile runs thick with the price of ambition. But amid the smoke and rubble, something lingers. The people whisper about Arsinoe, the girl who stood against Rome, the queen who fought when gods were silent. Her story spreads faster than the flames that once consumed her city. Children carve her name into temple walls. Poets write verses that compare her to the phoenix. Caesar doesn't notice. Cleopatra pretends not to care. Yet both know the rebellion isn't truly dead. It's just been buried alive. Later, in the palace, Cleopatra pours wine for Caesar, her hands steady, her tone effortless. "You've given Egypt peace," she says. He smiles, tired. "I've given it Rome." Their laughter echoes through marble halls that still smell faintly of smoke. Outside, the city rebuilds. Inside, the seeds of future ruin take root quietly, watered by ambition and denial. And somewhere far away, on a ship bound for exile, Arsinoe stands at the bow, the wind tangling her hair. She looks back toward the dim glow of Alexandria's ruins. There's no sorrow in her eyes, only promise. The narrator leans in, voice low and sharp. The moral of the story? Never underestimate a teenage girl with a grudge and an army. Or worse, time to think. As the horizon swallows the ship, the music fades. The waves hiss against the hull like applause. The curtain falls on the siege of Alexandria, not as an ending, but as intermission. Because Cleopatra's won the crown, Caesar's claimed the glory, and Arsinoe? She's just getting started on revenge. Rome loves a good show. Gladiators, executions, betrayals dressed up as pageantry. If it bleeds or cries on cue, it sells. And Julius Caesar? Oh, he knew his audience. When he sails back from Egypt, victorious and smug, he brings souvenirs. Gold, grain, gossip, and a queen in chains. Not Cleopatra. She's back in Alexandria playing goddess again. No, this is Arsinoe, the failed rebellion wrapped in royal dignity, paraded through Rome like a cautionary tale with eyeliner. The people line the streets, cheering for their hero. It's festival season, the wine flows, and someone even hangs laurel garlands. On Caesar's statues, the city smells of victory and spilled grapes. From the balcony seats, senators pretend they aren't terrified of the man who conquered half the known world and learned how to turn conquest into entertainment. Behind the cheering crowd, though, whispers crawl like smoke. Who is the girl in the golden chains? Arsinoe walks barefoot through the heart of Rome, her wrists bound, her neck weighed down by jewelry that glitters like mockery. She's draped in silk so heavy it looks like penance, the kind of mercy Romans give when they want to humiliate, not kill. But even now, even here, she refuses to look broken. Her spine is straight, her eyes defiant. The narrator exhales softly. You can't humiliate someone who's already met betrayal and called it family. Let's set the scene properly. Trumpets blare. Priests chant blessings. Soldiers toss flowers at Caesar's feet like confetti for a deity. His chariot gleams under the sun, pulled by white horses that look like they're auditioning for divinity. Behind him, carts overflow with spoils. Egyptian statues, captured soldiers, crates of papyrus that no one in Rome can read. And then comes her, Arsinoe, for last breath of a doomed uprising, the young woman who dared to call herself pharaoh. The crowd gasps, not out of cruelty but fascination. She's beautiful even in defeat, the kind of beautiful that unsettles. Whispers ripple through the mob. Is that Cleopatra? Someone asks. Another replies, no, her sister. The unlucky one. The narrator smirks. In this family, luck and survival rarely RSVP to the same dinner. Caesar, standing tall in his chariot, doesn't look back. He doesn't have to. The crowd sees what he wants them to see: Rome's superiority, his victory over chaos, the living embodiment of Rome's right to rule. Arsinoe is not a person today. She's a prop, and props don't get dialogue. Still, something strange happens. The people don't boo. They don't throw stones. They fall silent. For a heartbeat, Rome, that loud, arrogant, restless Rome, holds its breath. Because even in chains, Arsinoe carries herself like a queen. Her defiance becomes contagious, a quiet virus of empathy spreading through the onlookers. The narrator's tone softens. Empires can kill rebellion, but they can't always kill dignity. Up in the balcony, a Roman woman, rich, jeweled, untouchable, leans to her husband and whispers, "She looks like one of our own." The husband frowns. She's a foreigner, but the wife doesn't look away. "No," she says. She's a reminder. When the parade reaches the forum, the crowd erupts again, louder, wilder. Caesar raises his hand, basking in it. The sun gleams on his armor. He's no longer a man, he's mythology in progress. Arsinoe is dragged up the steps behind him, forced to kneel at the base of Jupiter's temple. The crowd roars for her death. That's how triumphs usually end, with the defeated executed publicly, sacrificed to the gods of spectacle. But this time, Caesar hesitates. It's not mercy, it's marketing. Killing a teenage girl, even a rebellious one, might sour his image. Rome likes its enemies evil, not tragic. So, in a rare twist, he spares her. "Send her to the temple of Artemis," he declares. "Let the goddess guard her." It's exile disguised as grace, a cage with better scenery. The narrator mutters, "Rome didn't invent PR, but Caesar perfected it." As the decision ripples through the crowd, the atmosphere changes. The cheers fade into murmurs. People start to look at Arsinoe differently, not as a prisoner, but as something nobler. Pity stirs, admiration even, because nothing terrifies a conqueror more than an enemy who survives. Arsinoe is led away through the back streets, the noise of the city fading behind her. The chains still clink, but her steps are steady. She's bruised, humiliated, technically defeated. But she's also alive, and that, in the Ptolemaic playbook, counts. As a win, Cleopatra, miles away, probably feels it. That faint tremor in her empire, the one shaped like unfinished business. The narrator leans in, voice half amused, half reverent. Rome celebrated its triumph, but somewhere deep down it knew. You don't parade the unimportant. You parade threats. Let's zoom out for a second. The parade fades, the streets are swept clean, and the people move on to the next scandal. But in the quiet aftermath, some Roman poets start writing verses. Small, dangerous ones. About the captured queen who didn't cry. A slave tells a story about how her gaze made even the conquerors flinch. Years later, senators will still whisper about that day, about the silence in the crowd, the girl who looked like pride sculpted in chains. Meanwhile, Cleopatra receives word of her sister's survival. The messenger's hands tremble as he delivers it. She listens, then nods once, expression unreadable. Maybe she's relieved. Maybe she's furious. Maybe she's calculating how long alive will stay convenient. She dismisses the messenger, turns to the window and murmurs. Some chains take longer to tighten. That night, in Rome, as torches flicker and the last echoes of the triumph fade, Caesar sits alone in his chambers. He's drunk, victorious, restless. On his desk lies a small golden bracelet, one that once belonged to Arsinoe, taken as spoils. He turns it over in his hand, studying the delicate engraving, "Daughter of Isis." He smirks. "Fitting," he says to no one. For a girl who refused to die quietly, he sets it aside. History, meanwhile, takes another note it will later misplace. The narrator's tone fades into a whisper now, calm, haunting. Imagine your worst breakup, Now imagine it's celebrated by 50,000 people with trumpets. And yet, you walk away. Arsinoe doesn't know it yet, but this parade, this so-called humiliation, has given her something rare: immortality through pity. In the eyes of Rome, she's a defeated queen. In the eyes of history, she's a survivor carved from spite and ceremony. As her ship sails away toward exile, she looks back once, eyes glinting in the dying light. Rome shrinks behind her, loud, cruel, magnificent. She says nothing. The wind does the talking. The camera lingers on the horizon, the faint outline of freedom ahead, the empire fading behind. The narrator closes softly. Some victories shout, others simply keep breathing. Ephesus, the city of marble dreams and sacred silence. Once it was a jewel of the Aegean, now for Arsinoe it's a gilded prison with good lighting. The temple of Artemis towers above everything, one of the 7 wonders of the world. A masterpiece of stone, gold, and misplaced faith. To outsiders, it's paradise. To Arsinoe, it's a reminder that even gods like to keep their prisoners comfortable. The sea air is calm here, annoyingly calm. The kind of peace that sounds like mockery after you've watched cities burn. Birds circle the temple roof while the priests recite hymns older than her dynasty. The incense smells sweet, but the memories it stirs are bitter. Smoke from Alexandria's fires, Caesar's cold smile, the roar of crowds that once called her Pharaoh. Every breeze feels like a whisper from a life that doesn't exist anymore. She's not chained now, not visibly, but exile has its own quiet shackles. Boundaries drawn in marble, curfews enforced by fear. Roman envoys visit occasionally, making sure the guest of Caesar stays devout and docile. Arsinoe plays along. She kneels at the altar, offers sacrifices, and lets the priests believe she's been tamed by holiness. But inside, she's counting. Not prayers, but years. The narrator leans in. Exile isn't the absence of war. It's war fought slowly, one memory at a time. Every morning, she walks the temple's courtyard barefoot. The marble is cold, smooth, and too perfect. She stares at her reflection in its polished surface. The same face Rome paraded, now hidden behind humility. Her attendants whisper that she's lucky to be alive. She almost laughs. Lucky isn't the word she'd use. Unfinished. Maybe. By night, she sits by her window overlooking the harbor. The torches from passing ships flicker like ghosts of the life she lost. She writes on scraps of papyrus, though she knows no messenger would dare deliver them. The letters are to no one, or maybe to Cleopatra. You won, sister. One begins, but tell me, does your crown sing you to sleep, or does it whisper my name? Rumors reach Ephesus like drifting embers. Cleopatra has a new Roman ally, Mark Antony, another general with a god complex and a weakness for beautiful disasters. Arsinoe hears their names together and feels that old ache. Not jealousy this time, but recognition. Her sister hasn't changed. She's still playing the same game, just with a new deck of emperors. The narrator's voice sharpens. Some people build empires. Others build performances. The temple priests adore Arsinoe. They call her the Blessed One, convinced that her survival is proof of divine favor. She doesn't correct them. Faith, after all, is useful camouflage. When they ask her to bless the crops or offer counsel to pilgrims, she smiles. Gently, politely, like someone practicing sainthood. But when night falls, the mask drops. She sharpens her mind like a blade, replaying every betrayal until it stops hurting and starts instructing. Every month, Roman couriers deliver reports from Alexandria. They think she doesn't listen, that she's just another docile exile with nothing left to lose. But she listens. She always listens. And when one of them slips, mentioning unrest among Cleopatra's advisors, Arsinoe hides her smile behind a prayer. She begins to attract visitors, travelers, refugees, a few. Exiled Egyptians who still whisper her name like a secret blessing. They come under the guise of worship but leave pledging quiet loyalty. Slowly, imperceptibly, her sanctuary becomes a network. The priests call it divine influence. The Romans call it nothing at all, because ignorance feels safer than awareness. Let's pause here. History loves to dramatize battles, but it often forgets the wars fought in silence. Arsinoe's victory now isn't in conquering cities. It's in surviving her own erasure. Her existence alone is rebellion. Every breath she takes in exile is a reminder that Caesar's mercy didn't finish the job. But the gods, if they exist, have a cruel sense of humor. Because just when Arsinoe starts to feel invincible again, fate delivers another visitor. A Roman diplomat arrives, bringing an ornate gift from Alexandria. A golden bracelet, once her own, returned by Cleopatra as a token of peace. Arsinoe holds it in her hand, its surface still warm from the messenger's touch. The narrator murmurs, "Peace, when sent by your enemy, is just a warning written in gold." That night, she can't sleep. She walks the temple corridors barefoot, her shadow dancing across the torchlight. The marble pillars feel colder than usual, as if listening. She whispers, "You took my crown, sister. You burned my name. But here I am, still alive in your thoughts." The temple doesn't answer, but the silence feels approving. Years pass like whispers. The priests grow older. The Roman overseers grow complacent. And Arsinoe? She grows sharper. Her beauty matures into something austere, her calm into strategy. She becomes both ghost and goddess, and exile people start to mythologize. Children in Ephesus tell stories about the queen who defied Rome. Pilgrims leave offerings not just to Artemis, but to her, the living saint who once ruled Egypt. And somewhere in Alexandria, Cleopatra begins to hear those stories too. They reach her throne room like distant thunder, subtle but impossible to ignore. A sister thought dead in all but name is being worshipped as divine. A living rival who doesn't even need a crown to matter. Cleopatra's smile doesn't falter. It never does. But her eyes betray something dangerous. Fear disguised as annoyance. The narrator pauses, the tone soft and cold. Power hates ghosts, because you can't kill what you already buried. In Ephesus, the sea winds shift. A new fleet has arrived in the harbor, Roman ships, this time escorted by Egyptian envoys. The priests don't question it. Politics is above their pay grade. Arsinoe watches from her balcony, the gold bracelet gleaming around her wrist like prophecy. She knows what's coming. She doesn't run. She doesn't plead. She simply straightens her back, adjusts her robes, and walks down the temple steps to meet her fate. Each footstep echoes like defiance on marble. The soldiers bow awkwardly. They know who she is. Queen Arsinoe, their captain says, his voice rehearsed. Cleopatra sends her regards. She smiles. A small, sharp smile that history almost misses. "Tell her," she replies. It took her long enough. The narrator lets the silence stretch, heavy and shimmering. Exile taught Arsinoe patience. Cleopatra should have remembered that patience can turn mercy into revenge. The camera pans upward. The temple bathed in moonlight, the waves whispering against the shore. The air feels thick, prophetic. The next dawn will bring visitors wearing royal colors and carrying divine excuses. But tonight, for one last time, the forgotten queen sleeps beneath the gaze of Artemis. A mortal wrapped in myth, a rival her sister can't stop dreaming about. Morning in Ephesus arrives like a lie. All sunlight, sea breeze, and serenity. The gulls circle lazily over the temple roof as if the gods themselves are bored of watching mortals repeat their mistakes. Inside the marble sanctuary, incense curls through the air, disguising the faint scent of fear. Priests move, quietly, as if they already know something sacred is about to be broken. And somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic thud of sandals on stone announces that Rome, or worse, Cleopatra, has arrived. Arsinoe wakes to the sound of whispers. Her attendants rush in, eyes wide, trembling. Envoys from Alexandria. One stammers. They say the queen herself has sent them. The words are polite. The tone isn't. Arsinoe sits up slowly, her face calm. Practiced calm. The kind forged by years of surviving other people's decisions. She dresses carefully, the way condemned royalty always does. Immaculate, deliberate, defiant. Her gold bracelet catches the morning light. the same one Cleopatra sent her years ago, a peace offering turned prophecy. Down the marble steps, the delegation approaches. Roman soldiers flank Egyptian officials, all avoiding each other's eyes. In the center walks a man dressed in the insignia of Mark Antony, Cleopatra's newest Roman obsession and the sharpest sword in her foreign policy. His face is unreadable, but his silence says everything. This isn't diplomacy, it's cleanup. Arsinoe meets them in the temple courtyard, framed by columns carved with stories of gods who punished pride and rewarded cunning. Fitting decor, really. The lead envoy bows stiffly. Queen Arsinoe of Egypt, he begins, the title landing like an insult. By decree of Queen Cleopatra VII, and with the sanction of Rome, your sanctuary is hereby revoked. She tilts her head slightly, lips curling. Revoked? She echoes, voice soft, almost amused. I didn't realize mercy came with an expiration date. The soldiers shift uncomfortably. One of them crosses himself, or whatever the Roman equivalent is for "May the gods forgive us for what we're about to do." The narrator breaks the stillness. Every empire has its rituals. For Rome, it was conquest. For Cleopatra, it was control. And for Arsinoe, it was surviving both. But survival has limits. The Temple of Artemis is supposed to be untouchable, a sanctuary under divine protection. Even Roman law respects its sacredness. To drag someone from its steps would be sacrilege, the kind of sin that echoes through history. But Cleopatra doesn't care about echoes anymore. She's too busy rewriting the script. The high priest protests, voice shaking. This ground belongs to the goddess. You have no right. The envoy ignores him. Orders are orders. Rome doesn't believe in curses, only consequences. Arsinoe raises her hand, silencing the priests before they can kneel. It's all right, she says, and for a moment even the air seems to pause. Her voice is steady, calm in the way only people who've stopped fearing death can sound. The goddess will not weep for me. She steps forward, down the temple stairs, the golden hem of her robe whispering against the stone. The soldiers hesitate, superstition flickering behind their eyes, but duty wins. They move to bind her wrists. She doesn't resist. She looks up at the morning sky, almost smiling. Tell my sister, she murmurs, that I forgive her. That should annoy her more than vengeance ever could. The narrator chuckles softly. Even facing execution, Arsinoe knew how to turn grace into a weapon. They lead her into the temple's inner courtyard, her own sanctuary turned execution ground. The high priest turns away, muttering prayers that sound more like apologies. One of the Roman guards looks ill. Orders. He keeps whispering, as if the word will absolve him. The sword is drawn. The sun flares off its blade. Arsinoe kneels on the cold marble floor, her reflection trembling in a pool of spilled oil. A perfect metaphor for her life. Brilliant, distorted, fleeting. The executioner hesitates. She meets his eyes, calm, almost kind. Do it quickly, she says. He does. Silence falls, not peace, but the hollow kind that follows irreversible things. The narrator's tone lowers to a whisper. And just like that, the last rival queen of Egypt was erased. Not by war, not by Rome, but by her own blood. The soldiers carry her body out through the temple gates, careful not to meet the priest's eyes. Outside, the mourning continues indifferently. Merchants shouting, gulls crying, waves breaking against the harbor. History rarely pauses for its tragedies. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra receives the message with the serenity of someone who's already rehearsed her reaction. Mark Antony delivers the report. It's done, he says. Cleopatra doesn't flinch. She pours herself wine, takes a slow sip, and replies, "Then Egypt is safe." But her hand trembles slightly as she sets the cup down. The narrator observes, Cleopatra always claimed divine ancestry, but even gods get haunted, especially by those they've silenced. That night, the queen dreams of marble steps slick with blood. She wakes before dawn, heart racing, the sound of chains echoing faintly in her ears. For a moment, she swears she can hear her sister's voice carried on the Nile breeze. "Forgiveness," it whispers, Was that worth your crown? In Ephesus, the priests bury Arsinoe in secret. They place her body in a hidden chamber beneath the temple floor, wrapping her in linen embroidered with lotus and gold. No grand procession, no royal funeral, just candlelight and quiet rebellion. One priest writes her name on the wall, Arsinoe IV, Pharaoh of Egypt. It's a crime to record it, but he does it anyway. The goddess will remember, he mutters, even if history forgets. Years later, travelers will claim that the temple feels colder at night, that footsteps echo where none should, that a young woman's shadow sometimes crosses the courtyard, looking out toward the sea. But maybe that's just superstition. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the unfinished story of a queen who refused to stay erased. The narrator's voice returns, softer now, almost mournful. In the end, history isn't written by the victors. It's cleaned by them. But every time someone mentions Cleopatra's name, a small, invisible echo answers. The ghost of the sister she tried to forget. The camera lingers on the temple at dusk, its pillars glowing orange, its silence immense. A single gull cuts across the sky, a white smear against fading light. And beneath it all, somewhere deep under the marble, the buried queen waits, not for resurrection, but for recognition. Because revenge, in the end, isn't always about killing. Sometimes it's about outlasting the myth that tried to bury you. The thing about silence is it never arrives empty. It carries echoes, guilt, the faint ring of things unsaid. After Arsinoe's execution, Egypt falls into one of those silences so complete it feels rehearsed. The temples burn incense for peace. The courtiers smile too long. And Cleopatra? She rules in golden quiet, the kind that looks like triumph but smells like penance. Alexandria rebuilds itself like a guilty witness. The palace glitters brighter than before, but it's overcompensating. Gold leaf, marble repairs, new mosaics of Isis blessing the queen. The priests hold ceremonies praising Cleopatra as savior of Egypt, as if repeating it enough times will make it true. The narrator's voice drifts, low and dry. When a kingdom chants too loudly about peace, it's usually trying to drown out ghosts. Cleopatra moves through her palace with the grace of someone who's mastered stillness. She speaks softly, smiles beautifully, and avoids mirrors that show too much. Rome calls her radiant. Her people call her divine. But behind her eyes, the ones poets describe as dark pools of mystery, something quieter stirs. Regret? No, Cleopatra doesn't do regret. But maybe remembrance, a shadow she can't quite command. At night, the hallways hum differently. Servants swear they hear footsteps, soft, measured, always stopping outside the queen's chamber. The torches flicker. The guards cross themselves. One claims he saw a figure in white by the reflecting pool, hair unbound, eyes like sorrow turned to light. Cleopatra laughs when told, but that night she keeps the lamps burning till dawn. The narrator leans in. You can erase a name from history, but you can't delete it from the parts of yourself that used to love it. The empire moves on. Rome praises Cleopatra's alliance with Mark Antony. Trade flourishes. Coins are minted with her face and his, a goddess and a conqueror, cheek to cheek. The propaganda machine hums at full volume. But buried beneath the glory, a fracture forms. Cleopatra has what she always wanted: power, stability, a Roman on speed dial. Yet she sleeps lighter than ever. Mark Antony notices it once. You never stop watching the door, he says one evening, his voice thick with wine. Cleopatra smirks. Habit, she replies. In my family, doors tend to open with bad news. He laughs, but she doesn't. She visits the temple of Isis one afternoon, alone. The priests bow low, whispering blessings. The air is thick with the perfume of lilies and old secrets. Cleopatra kneels, murmuring prayers that sound suspiciously like confessions. The gods favor the strong, she says quietly. The wind shifts, candles flicker, and somewhere in that tremor she swears she hears her sister's name. Arsinoe, soft, almost affectionate, is gone in a second, but it lingers just long enough to ruin the silence. Meanwhile, in Rome, Caesar's assassins carve his legacy into chaos. Cleopatra receives the news in perfect composure, as if she'd rehearsed the reaction. Rome devours its heroes, she says, and expects us to thank it for the meal. But something in her tone betrays fatigue, maybe even envy. Arsinoe didn't live to see her world collapse. Cleopatra will. Let's pause. History remembers Cleopatra as the eternal seductress, the woman who tamed Caesar, loved Antony, and died with style. But rarely do we picture her like this, pacing her palace in silence, haunted not by her lovers but by her sister. The narrator's voice softens. Every crown has ghosts. Some just whisper louder than others. Time stretches. The Nile floods and recedes, as it always has. Alexandria hums. Children grow up hearing half-truths about the queen's sister, the traitor who defied the throne, or the witch whose jealousy doomed her. The official story shifts depending on who's telling it. But no story ever quite kills the other one. Cleopatra commissions new art. Murals of victory, statues of herself draped in divinity, symbols of stability carved deep into the palace walls. Yet every artisan notices it, the recurring pattern, subtle but deliberate. Twin serpents side by side, one slightly behind the other. Private code, a confession disguised as ornament. She never explains it, but when a scholar once dares to ask, she smiles faintly and says, "Every goddess needs her shadow." That night, thunder rolls over Alexandria. Rare, unsettling. Cleopatra stands on her balcony, watching lightning ripple across the sea. Her attendants beg her to come inside. She doesn't. The rain soaks her gown, but she doesn't move. She whispers to the storm, "Are you satisfied now, little sister?" The thunder answers, low and distant. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. Down in the harbor, sailors tell stories about the queen talking to ghosts. Some swear that when lightning flashes, two figures can be seen on the palace balcony. One crowned in gold, the other draped in white. They drink to the legend, shrug, and say, "In Egypt, even silence has an audience." Cleopatra carries on, building alliances, negotiating with Rome, dazzling ambassadors with her intellect. She's every inch the queen the world expects. But occasionally, mid-sentence, she'll glance at an empty chair, just for a second, then continue as if nothing happened. No one dares ask. The narrator lowers their tone, almost tender now. The world remembers Cleopatra's lovers, her luxuries, her death. But what she couldn't silence, what history still feels if it listens hard enough, is the echo of the sister who refused to disappear. Years will pass. Antony will fall. Cleopatra will meet her end wrapped in the myth she built. But long before the ASP and the headlines, there was this, the quiet aftermath. The uneasy peace that followed a murder sanctified by politics. The camera drifts over the palace one last time, torches glowing against dark marble, the Nile whispering its eternal song. Somewhere beyond the walls, a temple still stands in Ephesus, and the wind carries a story neither empire nor queen could fully erase. The narrator closes the chapter softly. The silence after a storm isn't peace. It's the world catching its breath, before remembering what it's done. Time passes. The dust of Egypt drifts across centuries, and somewhere in Rome, the ink of propaganda starts to dry. Cleopatra's name has already been dressed up and dissected by men who never met her. Senators with quills instead of swords, rewriting her life between lunch breaks. They call her temptress, witch, manipulator. They paint her beauty as her weapon, her mind as her crime, and her ambition as proof of sin. And just like that, history becomes a gossip column written by victors. Arsinoe, meanwhile, she's barely a footnote. Rome prefers its women in two categories, the goddess and the disgrace. Arsinoe doesn't fit neatly into either, which makes her inconvenient, and inconvenient women vanish faster than papyrus in fire. The narrator's tone sharpens, dry and cutting. Every empire needs villains, and the best ones are foreign, female, and dead. Roman historians get busy. Plutarch calls Cleopatra seductive and dangerous, implying her eyes could destabilize a senate faster than an army. Dio Cassius describes her as if she were the prototype for corruption itself. A woman who made kings kneel. The word powerful becomes an accusation. But here's the twist. They also invent Arsinoe's silence. They make her disappear so completely that even her death becomes a side note to Cleopatra's drama. Because that's how propaganda works. It's not about what you say. It's about what you erase. In marble halls, senators speak of moral lessons, while scribes write their sanitized epics. Cleopatra becomes the cautionary tale of how empires fall to seduction. Arsinoe becomes an afterthought, the sister who lost, and therefore doesn't matter. But every story edited has a ghost between the lines. And this one, it's whispering. Let's zoom out. Rome loves storytelling almost as much as it loves conquest. The triumphant return parades, the speeches carved in stone, the plays that turn politics into bedtime myths. It's all theater, really. Cleopatra's fall becomes a blockbuster. Her lovers become tragic heroes. Arsinoe's rebellion? Cut for time. Too complicated. Too sympathetic. She doesn't fit the narrative of Rome as savior. The narrator chuckles darkly. You'd think a civilization that built aqueducts could handle nuance, but apparently not. What's remarkable and sinister is how effective it all is. By the time Augustus, Rome's new golden boy, consolidates power, the Mediterranean is flooded with statues of pure Roman virtue. Cleopatra's name is synonymous with sin. Arsinoe's isn't mentioned at all. Scholars centuries later will call this historical omission. Let's call it what it really is, a hit job with better marketing. Imagine it, scrolls copied and recopied across generations. The ink changes, but the message stays the same. Powerful women are dangerous. Rebellious ones are expendable. The narrator softens, almost pitying. Men conquer nations, and they get monuments. Women challenge them, and they get moral lessons. Even art gets in on the slander. Roman mosaics depict Cleopatra draped in jewels, her gaze painted as hypnotic, because God forbid she just be intelligent. Poets write verses about foreign poison, turning her into an allegory for temptation itself. But what's poetic about erasure? What's romantic about being rewritten by strangers who couldn't spell your language? And yet, irony alert, this strategy works too well. The world forgets Arsinoe's name. Cleopatra's myth swells to fill every space, becoming both tragedy and triumph. Rome wins not just the war, but the story. And stories, as every empire knows, are stronger than swords. Still, a few fragments survive. A Greek historian mentions a princess spared from Caesar's wrath. Another, centuries later, claims her tomb lies in Ephesus, though he doesn't say where. These scraps flutter through time like embers from a burned library, enough to remind us that truth was once alive. Meanwhile, Cleopatra's image travels like wildfire through history, retold by poets, painters, playwrights, every man trying to explain her and every woman trying to reclaim her. The narrator sneers. 2,000 years of men misquoting her eyeliner. Arsinoe's absence becomes her power, because sometimes what's missing says more than what remains. Cleopatra's myth is loud, glamorous, cinematic. Arsinoe's story is quiet, the kind that hums in the background, reshaping meaning long after the lights go out. Let's pause for a breath, because this part of history, it isn't just ancient, it's recurring. Every age has its Cleopatras and its Arsinoes. One wins the headlines, the other disappears into the margins. Every generation writes its own version of who deserves the spotlight. And every time, the forgotten one lingers, waiting for someone curious enough to look sideways. Back in Rome, the empire starts turning on itself. The Senate rots from paranoia. The idealists die poetic deaths. The narrator smiles bitterly. Turns out, you can't build eternal glory on gossip and grief. Who knew? But the propaganda doesn't die. It metastasizes, copied into textbooks, echoed by Renaissance painters, whispered in Victorian drawing rooms. Cleopatra becomes the femme fatale, the cautionary symbol for ambitious women. Arsinoe fades to myth, then rumor, then maybe nothing at all. Yet somewhere in that deliberate silence, there's power. Every time a historian questions Rome's version, Arsinoe's shadow flickers. Every time a scholar says, "Wait, what if Cleopatra wasn't the only story here?" That's her resurrection. Small but defiant. The narrator lowers their voice to a murmur, like a secret passed through centuries. Rome wrote her out, but forgetting is never perfect. History leaks. Now picture this, a dusty archive somewhere in modern Europe. A historian unrolls a fragment of papyrus no one's read in centuries. The ink is faded, the script uncertain. But the words mention a queen, a sister, a rebellion, temple. The historian looks up, frowning, sensing the weight of something missing. Who was Arsinoe for? They ask the air. The answer, faint, amused, eternal, comes from the dust itself. The one who wouldn't stay gone. The narrator chuckles, then softens. Rome may have written the ending, but it never controlled the sequel. Every rediscovery, every whisper, every question. That's Arsinoe's revenge. The camera fades on crumbling Roman statues, their faces blank with time. A woman's voice, maybe Cleopatra's, maybe Arsinoe's, echoes faintly. "Remember me wrong, but remember me still." Then silence again, the kind that feels less like forgetting and more like something waiting to be rewritten. The centuries turn, empires crumble, sand buries marble, memory buries truth. But not all ghosts stay quiet. Somewhere beneath the soil of modern-day Turkey, the air hums with a rumor older than Rome itself. A tomb, a woman, a secret that refuses to die. It begins in Ephesus, the same city that once held Arsinoe captive. The Temple of Artemis is long gone now, toppled by time and earthquakes, but its ruins still whisper. Tourists shuffle past columns half swallowed by grass. Archaeologists, armed with shovels and hubris, dig deeper, chasing history like it owes them closure. And one afternoon they find it, or at least something pretending to be it. A circular tomb hidden beneath layers of earth. Stone walls etched with faint, foreign symbols. Inside, bones delicate, regal, unmistakably human. There's jewelry, too. Fragments of gold filigree. A diadem crushed under centuries of silence. The kind of artifacts that make you whisper without knowing why. The narrator leans in. It's one thing to find a grave. It's another to find a ghost with receipts. At first, the archaeologists are cautious. Hellenistic period. One mutters. Royal burial, says another. But then they notice the inscriptions. Faint Greek letters that, when cleaned, reveal a name no one expected. Arsinoe. The camp falls silent. The air seems to hold its breath. Could it be her? The exiled sister? The murdered queen? Cleopatra's forgotten mirror? Or just another royal buried with the same unlucky name? The narrator smirks. History's great at coincidences. When they're convenient, the discovery hits the academic world like a storm. Professors argue over carbon dates, bone measurements, lineage probabilities. Someone runs DNA tests, or at least what's left of them, and claims a faint trace of Macedonian ancestry. Close enough to be possible. Not close enough to be proof. But proof has never been history's strong suit. Myth, however, that always finds believers. Within months, headlines flood in. Cleopatra's sister found. Museum curators salivate. Documentary producers circle like vultures. Egyptologists groan into their tea. And through it all, one quiet truth hums underneath the noise. The dead, once again, are more interesting when they belong to someone famous. The narrator sighs. History loves a comeback, especially when the star can't complain about royalties. Tourists flock to Ephesus. They snap photos beside the tomb, smiling like they're posing with celebrity bones. Guides sell Arsinoe's legacy keychains. The irony is almost holy. The woman who once died nameless now funds snack stalls and museum gift shops. It's not resurrection, it's rebranding. But here's the haunting part. The skull inside that tomb, before it went missing, of course, because history also loves irony, revealed something unexpected. High cheekbones, narrow jawline, a mix of features that didn't scream Greek or Roman. Some researchers whispered African ancestry. Others denied it furiously, as if the idea itself was blasphemy. The narrator's voice drops low. Apparently, even after death, the Ptolemies can still start an argument about race. The debate rages. Academics duel with footnotes. Forums light up. Cleopatra's image, already stretched between continents, cultures, and centuries, fractures even further. Was Arsinoe part Egyptian, part African, part myth? Does it matter? Or does it just prove that history's still obsessed with ownership? Everyone wants a piece of her. Rome wanted her crown, Cleopatra wanted her silence, and now scholars want her DNA. Meanwhile, locals in Ephesus tell a different story. They say the tomb was always cursed, that on certain nights, the air around it grows colder, that archaeologists who linger too long start dreaming of a woman standing by the sea, her hair tangled in wind, whispering something they can't quite remember when they wake. Superstition, maybe, but the timing's poetic. Let's pause and breathe, because this is the point where the past stops being distant and starts feeling personal. A grave becomes a mirror. We look down into the dirt and see ourselves staring back. Same hunger for certainty, same need to make meaning out of bones. The narrator softens. We dig for closure. We find reflection. Years pass, and the excavation site grows quiet again. The press moves on. The tourists dwindle. The scientists file their reports. The tomb remains, open, half-forgotten, covered now by dust and weeds. And somewhere, under the layers of polite academic debate, the question still burns. Was it really her? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the truth isn't in the bones, but in the fact that people are still asking. Because questions are how ghosts survive. One night, a storm hits the Aegean coast. Lightning flashes over the ruins, rain hammers the stone, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, the tomb glows in the stormlight. Locals swear they hear footsteps, faint and deliberate, echoing through the corridors below. But by morning, the rain has washed everything clean again. History resets itself. The narrator whispers, almost tenderly, maybe the gods wanted her to stay half-remembered, like a warning, not a legend. Too real to forget, too dangerous to worship. We fade to black on the tomb, moss creeping over its edges, sunlight catching the faint outline of the name Arsinoe. Her bones may or may not rest there, but her story does, stubborn, haunting, unfinished. And as the camera pans out, the narrator adds one last breath of irony. In life, she fought to be seen. In death, she became impossible to ignore. History doesn't do justice. It does déjà vu. Every empire that rises eventually performs the same tragic ballet. Arrogance, denial, downfall, repeat. Cleopatra's act is almost finished now. She's conquered lovers, silenced rivals, and staged her life like theater for the gods. But karma, that old playwright, is finally in the audience, and it's holding the pen. The Rome she once seduced is changing. Julius Caesar is long gone, stabbed 33 times by men who loved him too much to let him live. His heir, Octavian, is colder, cleaner, more efficient, the kind of man who sees affection as a security threat. And standing beside Cleopatra is Mark Antony, Caesar's protege turned lover, soldier turned myth, brilliant, reckless, and fatally human. Together, they think they can outplay Rome. Spoiler, they can't. The narrator's tone sharpens. Rome doesn't fall for the same trick twice, especially when it's wearing perfume. Cleopatra and Antony's empire glitters for a while. They rule from Alexandria, throwing feasts that make Caesar's look like potlucks. Gold flows, dancers spin, philosophers debate, and the wine pours endlessly. Every night is an ode to victory. Every morning, the hangover of denial. They call themselves the new Isis and Dionysus, gods reborn in human form. The people cheer partly out of devotion, mostly out of habit. But the cracks begin quietly. Rome's Senate whispers that Antony's gone native, bewitched by the Egyptian queen. Coins appear in Rome stamped with Cleopatra's face, an image Octavian calls blasphemy and brilliance in the same breath. He's forgotten who he is, Octavian declares. And worse, who she is. Cleopatra knows the game. She's played it since birth. Her smile is still a weapon, her mind still a labyrinth. But for the first time, she feels time pressing close, that quiet inevitability that follows every dynasty. Her empire is a sandcastle and the tide is Roman. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, Octavian sharpens his story. He doesn't need to beat Antony in battle, he just needs to beat him in reputation. He paints Cleopatra as the villain of civilization, the barbarian temptress corrupting a good Roman man. Pamphlets spread through the streets, whispering filth disguised as patriotism. She's turned him against us, they say. She wants Rome for herself. It's ancient smear marketing, and it works. The narrator smirks. Every generation invents its own tabloids. Octavian just used better fonts. Soon, war comes. Not an eruption, a slow burn. Armies move, allegiances shift, and Cleopatra once again finds herself performing the same scene she once forced Arsinoe to play. Waiting, defending, pretending not to be afraid. Somewhere in Ephesus, beneath the marble dust, the gods must be laughing. At Actium, it all unravels. Cleopatra's fleet burns on the water, Antony's legions scatter, and the dream of an Eastern empire dies in smoke. The irony is almost poetic. The woman who turned seduction into strategy is undone by loyalty. She flees, dragging Antony with her, her ships limping across the sea. The narrator softens. Every empire ends with someone whispering, "We can still fix this," when everyone knows they can't. Back in Alexandria, the palace feels smaller now, quieter, emptier. Cleopatra walks its halls, remembering other sieges, other fires, other ghosts. Somewhere in those corridors, she swears she hears Arsinoe's voice again, that same steady tone from years ago. "You can chain me, but Egypt remembers who I am." Cleopatra presses her hand against the marble and whispers, "I remember too." Mark Antony, broken and bleeding pride, can't bear the weight of defeat. When false news reaches him that Cleopatra has died, he falls on his sword, because in this family, tragedy has always been theatrical. Cleopatra finds him alive just long enough to say goodbye. The scene is cinematic, almost rehearsed. Two lovers drenched in blood and irony, promising eternity while surrounded by empire-shaped ruins. The narrator sighs, "When gods fall in love, mortals clean up the mess." Now alone, Cleopatra faces her final act. Octavian enters the city like a man walking into his inheritance. He finds her not cowering but regal, her hair perfectly coiled, her poise immaculate. Even cornered, she looks like a painting no one can afford to frame. Octavian offers her mercy, Rome's favorite euphemism for submission. "You'll be paraded," he says, "in chains as Rome's prize." And that's when Cleopatra smiles, slow, knowing, deadly. "Rome has enough ghosts," she replies. "It doesn't need another one." She arranges her death as art. A golden chamber, incense burning, servants crying quietly in corners. She dons her royal robes, the same linen that once dazzled Caesar, the same gold that once blinded senators. In her hand, an ASP, coiled, silent, inevitable. She lifts it calmly, like a queen conducting her final symphony. One bite, then another. The serpent does its work. The camera lingers on her face, serene, defiant, free. Outside, Rome celebrates. Inside, history holds its breath. The narrator whispers, "Cleopatra's body dies, but her myth survives. Arsinoe's body died long ago, but her silence lives." One became legend, the other became lesson. Both, in the end, became prophecy. Octavian orders Cleopatra buried with Antony. A PR move, a political compromise, a tidy ending for a messy story. But somewhere deep down, he knows he didn't just conquer a kingdom. He conquered a symbol. And symbols, inconveniently, have a habit of coming back. Back in Ephesus, the sea hums against the shore. The wind moves through the ruins of the Temple of Artemis, brushing against the stones like a whisper. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. Two voices, one defiant, one weary, both royal. In trying to erase me, one says, "You made me eternal." The narrator closes the scene, voice low, reflective, darkly amused. Cleopatra thought she buried her sister. What she really buried was her own reflection. Because history doesn't forget, it just waits for better lighting. The camera fades out. Two crowns glint faintly in the dark. One polished, one cracked, both unforgettable. The story could have ended there. Cleopatra's snakebite, Antony's sword, a neat Roman epilogue about order restored. But history, being the drama addict that it is, doesn't stop at closure. It lingers, it scratches, it whispers, "Wait, what about the other one?" Enter the historians, modern-day archaeologists, classicists, and a few caffeine-fueled truth hunters sitting under bad lighting, staring at ancient papyri, asking the forbidden question. Who was Arsinoe for? Really? Because for centuries, she was a ghost. Mentioned only when convenient, blamed when useful, forgotten when necessary. The rival queen, the jealous sister, the failed pharaoh. That's how Rome and Egypt both framed her. But modern scholars, armed with microscopes and attitude, start realizing something. Arsinoe wasn't the villain in Cleopatra's story. She was the consequence. The narrator grins, voice laced with irony. Turns out, when men wrote the history of powerful women, they edited out the complicated ones first. Let's rewind through the ruins. Somewhere between the burned scrolls of the Library of Alexandria and the footnotes of Roman historians, Arsinoe's identity fractures, but fragments of her survive. Letters from Greek envoys mention a queen in exile commanding loyalty. Coins surface with her likeness, faint, worn, but defiant. And the records of the Temple of Artemis describe a royal woman of divine blood, living under sanctuary. For a ghost, she left quite the paper trail. Arsinoe's story begins to shift, no longer the jealous shadow, but the strategist. A survivor of palace politics, propaganda, and 2 empires' worth of patriarchal editing. Historians start connecting dots that were never meant to touch. They realize that Cleopatra didn't just erase a sister, she erased a threat. The narrator leans closer, because nothing terrifies legacy like someone else surviving it. Even the timeline looks different under scrutiny. Arsinoe was a teenager when she led a rebellion against Rome. A teenager commanding troops, negotiating with priests, and holding off Julius Caesar for months. Something no seasoned general managed. Yet ancient writers dismissed her as ambitious beyond her station. Translation: she didn't know her place. Modern scholars read between the lines. They see the language of dismissal, the sexist filters buried under centuries of marble. When Cassius Dio calls Arsinoe a foolish girl, they note the subtext, how dare she lead? When Roman poets mock Cleopatra for her beauty, they realize it's not lust. It's fear disguised as literature. Slowly, the narrative begins to flip. In documentaries and museum exhibits, a new image emerges. Arsinoe as the anti-Cleopatra. Not the seductress, but the soldier. Not the diplomat, but the dissenter. A young woman who refused to be defined by charm, who used defiance as currency in a world where femininity was a weapon. And the more people learn, the more uncomfortable the old story starts to feel. The narrator chuckles softly. Imagine finding out your favorite historical icon came with deleted scenes. Turns out, the queen you worshipped had a sister she ghosted. Literally. But beyond the irony, something deeper happens. Women, historians, artists, novelists start resurrecting Arsinoe not as Cleopatra's enemy, but as her equal. Not a mirror, but a counterpoint. They paint her not as jealous, but as justified. They write essays with titles like The Erased Pharaoh and The Girl Who Defied Rome. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Arsinoe wanted all along. Not to rule forever, but to be remembered correctly. Let's pause for a reflective breath. Because rewriting history isn't about revenge. It's about balance. For every Cleopatra crowned, there's an Arsinoe buried. For every monument to power, there's a story of survival hiding underneath it. And every time someone asks, What about her? Another forgotten queen takes a step out of the shadows. In a university somewhere, a young historian holds up an image of Arsinoe's supposed tomb. She speaks softly to her students. We don't know if these bones are really hers, but we do know this. Someone wanted her erased. The students lean forward. That's the moment it happens, the spark, the resurrection that doesn't need divinity, only curiosity. The narrator smiles. Maybe immortality isn't about temples or crowns. Maybe it's about refusing to stay buried. In Ephesus, the same wind that once brushed against the temple of Artemis still moves through the ruins. At sunset, the stones glow gold. Tourists walk past, half listening to their guide's speech. But one woman, maybe a student, maybe just curious, lingers a little longer. She touches the wall, traces a faint carving that looks suspiciously like a royal symbol, and whispers, "I remember you." The camera pans out. The sea shimmers. The light softens. The world keeps spinning. But in that single whisper, history blinks, because the forgotten queen has been spoken aloud again. The narrator's tone slows, gentle now, almost tender. Maybe she wasn't the rival queen of betrayal. Maybe she was the queen of being betrayed, and the only one honest enough to admit it. A pause. The waves crash softly. The story exhales. Cleopatra gave us the legend of ambition. Arsinoe gave us the warning. And both, in their own ways, gave us the truth, that power without empathy always ends in ruin. The music fades, half melancholy, half hopeful. The last shot lingers on the horizon, golden and endless. Somewhere beyond the light, two sisters stand side by side again. One made of myth, one made of memory, finally sharing the same story. The ruins of Ephesus don't make noise. They hum, not like a song, more like memory vibrating under the sun. Wind slips through broken columns and empty courtyards, carrying voices too old for language. This is where the world remembers and forgets at the same time. The narrator's voice enters softly, slower than before. A tone halfway between lullaby and lament. History isn't gone, it just settles like dust. And if you stay quiet long enough, you can almost hear it breathing. The camera moves through the ruins. Shattered marble, uneven steps, the ghostly skeleton of the Temple of Artemis. Somewhere beneath it lies Arsinoe's rumored tomb. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe she's everywhere, dissolved into the stones, hiding in the cracks, folded into the silence of centuries. A guide leads a group of tourists past the site. He gestures grandly, pointing at nothing in particular. Here, perhaps, he says, was the resting place of Cleopatra's sister, the rival queen. Most of the group nods politely and shuffle away to the souvenir stalls. But one little girl lingers. She stares at the ruins, squints, and asks, "Did she win?" The guide blinks, caught off guard. "Well, no," he replies awkwardly. The girl frowns. "Then why are we still talking about her?" And there it is, the entire point of the story, delivered by someone still too young to be cynical. The narrator chuckles gently. When a child questions empire, you know the past still has pulse. Arsinoe's name drifts in and out of the modern world like a rumor. Academic journals debate her lineage. Authors borrow her tragedy for novels. Filmmakers cast her as misunderstood. But beyond the screens and seminars, her legacy feels more personal, like a mirror we didn't know we were holding. Because here's the truth. Every generation finds its Arsinoe, the one who wasn't supposed to lead but did, the one silenced but still remembered, the one history tried to label, simplify, erase, and failed. The camera pans across the dust. The narrator's voice lowers. For every Cleopatra who takes the crown, there's an Arsinoe who keeps the conscience. A slow breeze stirs. The air glitters with motes of light, particles of stone, time, and maybe something else. The narrator pauses. Breathe that in, dust and all. It's what's left of every story that tried to outlast us. Modern Alexandria flashes across the screen. Highways, honking cars, neon lights. The city is alive again, but beneath its streets still lie the bones of dynasties. The old harbor's gone, but the Nile still flows, patient and indifferent. In museums, Tourists stare at Cleopatra's statues, her face carved smooth by centuries of admiration. But in Ephesus, Arsinoe's remains, whether hers or not, sit quietly under glass, unbothered by grandeur. A curator cleans the case and whispers, "She looks peaceful." The narrator hums dryly, "Peace isn't the absence of war. It's just the point where nobody's left to argue." Let's pause here, because this chapter, this silence, isn't about pity. It's about recognition. Arsinoe doesn't need rescuing. She needs remembering. She doesn't need vindication. She needs her story told without filters. And maybe that's what we owe her, not worship, not myth, but honesty. Imagine it. Two sisters, one worshipped as a goddess, the other condemned as a rebel. Both trapped in the same golden lie, that power redeems cruelty, that fame erases failure. Cleopatra lived for legacy. Arsinoe lived despite it. One was crowned, the other was crucified by narrative. And yet, centuries later, who truly won? The narrator whispers, "Cleopatra got immortality. Arsinoe got truth." History's been trying to reconcile that ever since. A scholar in modern Cairo gives a lecture titled The Forgotten Pharaoh. Her students sit wide-eyed as she projects images of ancient coins, temple carvings, and the disputed tomb. Arsinoe IV, she says, was more than a footnote. She was the reminder that even in defeat, resistance can echo. Someone in the audience claps, just one person. But it's enough. The camera cuts back to Ephesus at twilight. The ruins glow amber in the fading light. Crickets sing. The world feels suspended between past and present, like it's holding its breath. A gust of wind sweeps through the site, scattering sand across the stone floor. For a second, it almost looks like movement, like a figure passing through. A shadow, faint, regal, curious. Then it's gone. The narrator smiles quietly. "You can call it coincidence. I call it persistence. Let's slow down one last time, because maybe this isn't a ghost story at all. Maybe it's an inheritance, the idea that some names refuse to stay buried, not because of vengeance, but because of meaning." The screen fades to black and the voice softens into near whisper. History loves its heroes loud and its women quiet, but every ruin hums with names it forgot to keep. The music swells, a soft blend of strings and wind, gentle but haunting. The dust glows in the last trace of sunlight. And then, as if the earth itself exhales, the narrator leaves us with one last thought. Maybe she doesn't need statues. Maybe the dust is enough, because the dust remembers everything. The story of Cleopatra and Arsinoe doesn't end in marble. It ends in mirrors. Two faces, forever staring at each other across time. One worshipped, one erased. One gilded by legend, the other buried in dust. And yet, together, they built the paradox that still defines how we remember power, especially when it wears a woman's face. The narrator's tone opens slow, poetic. Every dynasty leaves a scar, but some scars glitter. The Ptolemies carved theirs into eternity. Half gold, half gilt. We see the Nile at dawn. The river looks timeless, but the world it reflects has changed 1,000 times since these two sisters ruled. Fishermen cast nets where royal barges once sailed. Children play in the shadow of ruins that used to be palaces. History doesn't fade, it adapts. Cleopatra remains everywhere. In films, paintings, perfume ads, pop culture, and conspiracy theories. Her image has become a myth wearing eyeliner. She's reborn every generation, each version louder than the last. The seductress, the scholar, the victim, the feminist icon. She's whatever we need her to be: convenient, cinematic, marketable. And Arsinoe? She's the ghost haunting all those portrayals, the part no one filmed. The invisible what if. The story that refuses to stay buried because it was never truly told. The narrator sighs softly. "We built Cleopatra into a goddess, so we wouldn't have to ask what it cost. Now we finally do." Modern historians are peeling back the propaganda. The marble statues of Rome crumble, but the truths they hid start to crawl back into the light. Archaeologists compare temple records, DNA tests, old inscriptions. piecing together a mosaic that feels less like legend, more like confession. They find evidence of collaboration between the sisters before the betrayal, of shared tutors, maybe even shared dreams. Imagine that, two girls in the same palace, memorizing the same myths, never realizing they'd become one. One scholar writes, "They weren't opposites. They were reflections, one made of sunlight, the other of shadow." The camera cuts between Cleopatra's portraits and the empty space where Arsinoe's likeness should have been. It's like looking at a missing twin in a family photo. The narrator continues, "History only ever had room for one of them, but they were never meant to be rivals, only victims of the same story." Let's pause here, slow the tempo, because this is the moment of reckoning. We love Cleopatra because she won the spotlight. We pity Arsinoe because she didn't, but both were trapped in the same golden illusion, that power could save them from the fate of every woman born into a world built by men. Cleopatra used charm as armor. Arsinoe used defiance as shield. Both learned that brilliance is dangerous when the audience prefers obedience. So which one was right? Which one was stronger? The narrator laughs softly. That's the wrong question. They were both strong. The tragedy is that the world only rewards one kind of strength, the kind that burns brighter, not longer. The camera fades to modern Egypt. Cairo at night. Neon lights flicker over the Nile. Car horns mix with prayer calls. A mural of Cleopatra stares down from a city wall, her eyes defiant, half smiling. But just beneath it, in faded graffiti, someone has scrawled a single word, Arsinoe. Almost invisible, almost forgotten, almost. A streetlight flickers, and for a moment, the two names glow together, Queen and Ghost, side by side. The narrator's tone shifts, warmer now, almost reverent. We remember Cleopatra's face, but Arsinoe's silence says more. Together, they remind us that legacy isn't about who won, but who endured. Historians like to say Cleopatra's death ended the age of pharaohs. But maybe Arsinoe's survival, her echo through centuries of erasure, started something new. A warning, pattern, a whisper that power built on betrayal doesn't outlast empathy, only delays the reckoning. And here's the final irony. Cleopatra sought immortality and got myth. Arsinoe sought survival and got memory. Myth dazzles, memory lingers. One entertains, the other endures. The narrator slows, softer now, voice like sand underfoot. In the end, the two queens weren't opposites. They were mirrors, one reflecting what the world wanted to see, glory, desire, empire. The other reflecting what it didn't, consequence, rebellion, truth. Cut to the ruins of Alexandria's royal quarter. Divers swim through submerged corridors where palaces once stood. A broken statue stares up from the seabed, its face half gone, half perfect. Maybe Cleopatra, maybe Arsinoe, maybe both. The water moves gently, as if time itself is brushing away what's left of propaganda. The narrator's tone grows quiet, final. Cleopatra built her legend in life. Arsinoe earned hers in death. And between them, they taught us that history doesn't repeat itself. It just hides the receipts. Music swells, a low, haunting string arrangement. The imagery slows. The Nile glowing gold at sunset, Ephesus bathed in dusk, the faint outline of two women walking side by side through time's haze. The narrator delivers the closing lines, crisp yet reflective. One was the queen of spectacle, the other, the queen of silence. But together they wrote a story empires tried to erase and failed. So next time you hear Cleopatra's name, remember, the shadow beside her wasn't weakness, it was witness. A long pause, then, softly, a smile in the voice. Still think history's boring? Good. That means you were paying attention. If you made it here, congratulations, you've just resurrected a queen history tried to delete. Hit subscribe, not for Cleopatra, but for Arsinoe, for every story buried under the noise of legend. Because truth, like dust, always finds its way back into the light.